So it's great to speak today with Bryan Frank, president of the DC Tri Club. Bryan, how are you doing?
I am doing very well. How about yourself, Gary?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. We're getting into the autumn fall season, and
Yes.
that's not always the best because it tends to rain a bit more. But yeah, do you obviously with DC Tri Club, you guys you've had an interesting year. So I think that what would be really useful to start with is just if you can just tell us a bit about the club, because I think for the purpose of this discussion, it'd be really interesting to understand the club sort of ecosphere, if you like, and how that
Sure. Yeah.
plays out in the US. So maybe if you could tell us a bit about the club and how you guys are structured, that'd be
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. So we're a non-for-profit, 501c7, I believe, structured nonprofit organization. We are a sports club. We typically look at ourselves as a sports club with a triathlon problem. So we're more about the social event or a social club with a triathlon problem. We kind of look at ourselves as doing things more on the social side, and then we all like get together and train and race. So that kind of is what is our common ground that brings a lot of the people together.
Yeah, yeah.
We have the club itself. We are all over the DC regional area. So the majority of our, like 50% of our membership is in the Washington, DC region itself or district, whereas probably 30% are in the Northern Virginia, Arlington, Alexandria, just across the river and across the Potomac. And then about 20% are up in the Maryland counties that kind of surround the DC area. So we kind of aren't just all focused on DC. We kind of span the whole area. We also have people who are still members who have moved on to Colorado or Texas who still maintain their membership in our club despite the fact that they're not regional anymore. As far as that's structure wise, people wise, we are probably 50% men, women. I think we actually might be a little bit larger, 51, 52% female. And then we span the entire gamut of ages, speeds. So we have young, straight out of college. We're not at a youth organization. We're an adult organization. So 18 and over. And then we have people up to probably 60, 70 years old in the club. We have people of color. We support LGBTQ members. We really support any type of diversity within our club. And then speed wise, we have back of the packers, and then we have we're lucky enough that within the club structure we have an elite team, an amateur elite team that we have. So we have people who are out winning races, Kona qualifiers, age group national, age group world qualifiers as well. So we kind of run the breadth of everything within the club.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So in terms of the way that the club's set up is in the USA, because you would be one of the bigger clubs, right? So quite a few hundred members. Kind of
Correct. At the last time I knew USA Triathlon ran their numbers of clubs, we were the third largest in the nation. That was probably back in 2013, 14, and we had approximately 1,400 members back then. So I think we were the third largest behind San Diego and LA. As far as where we are now, I know the sport has shrunk. Things have changed, especially here in the Washington, D.C. area with changes in administration. We're down to, I think, around 700 to 800 members within our purview for right now. So it's changed, and I know we'll talk about that later. But the sport has changed, and so I think our membership has changed along with that.
Yeah, yeah, reflecting that. So as you say, you've got San Diego, there's California Tri, LA Tri.
Yeah.
You would be like the Uber clubs, if you like, within the US.
If you will, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, hopefully, obviously, getting back to that size that you were at a few years ago. So
I would love to. I'm not one of my goals as being president of the club has really been not about just growth of the club. I'm not about just having as many members as possible, because I don't think that really means much. I want the experience that our members have to be better. So it's more about, if we continue to grow our numbers because people are staying around a lot longer, then that's the growth I hope we can get. But it's really about giving the people who come into the sport and spend their time doing triathlon. I know some people it's a lifestyle, it's a life changing. Some people it's just I want to do a one and done, or I want to do a couple years of it. So we really want to make sure that while they're with the club, that their experience within triathlon and the sport is the best that we can make it.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. In terms of this year, so it's been a challenging year for many. It'd be really interesting to understand how that's impacted the club and how you see it's impacted other clubs that that you may have nearby or that you may look to as friendly competitors. So I suppose how have the past few months been for DC Tri in particular?
It's definitely been a challenging year for us, especially because we've, like I said, we consider ourselves a social club with a triathlon problem. So the fact that we have to be socially distant, and which I would really prefer we had branded it physically distant, not socially distant. But we've had to change, had to really, change our perspective on how are we going to engage club members, because we really are about the social stuff, the getting together for bike rides or happy hours or run groups and stuff, things we can't do anymore, at least for now, while we're still under some, or distancing and limitations on sizes requirements by the local authorities. So we really have had to change. So a lot of this, what we've tried to do this year has been to engage people virtually. And that's been very tough, just because I know everybody is going to either virtual working, and they might have kids at home who are doing virtual schooling, and everybody's getting Zoomed and WebExed and out, that they just don't want to spend more time on a computer at night with friends when they're like, it's not that much fun to sit around on your own table drinking while you're talking to people, virtually, but that's about all we can do. For now, we keep the problem, and then now we're moving into colder weather. I wish the restrictions had been lifted a little, or like trying a way to get outdoors into a park to do some type of in-person happy hour, but physically distant, where you all bring your own beer, wine, recovery drink, or whatever, and just get together, but you're 6 feet apart and wear your masks. So it's been challenging. We have tried to do a lot more. We did a virtual triathlon event within the club, where we had people, choose either a sprint, Olympic, or half distance, and we, let them bike and run those distances. Not everybody had access to a pool, and so we let them do kind of an athlete's choice for a certain amount of time, whether it was chopping wood or watching paint dry or just sitting with your animal or your pet or your children, doing something like that. That was something that we tried to do as something to keep some type of motivation within the club. Now at the fall timeframe, as kind of restrictions have been lifted up, we actually brought back some time trials, kind of in-person racing, but we had a 20-person max capacity. Everybody went off a minute apart, so it wasn't I could run the event with one or two volunteers who didn't have to stand close to each other. So it was very easy to bring something like that back in an in-person environment and to have that team camaraderie together.
Yeah. I'm guessing you probably got quite a lot of buy-in to that, and I'm guessing that was kind of the capacity. It's really interesting debate, isn't it? I mean, the point you made earlier around stuck in front of Zoom or Teams or whatever it might be, and then well, now I've got to go on Zwift, or I've got to go on Movie, or whatever the platform might be. It's still staring at your screen. So it's a really interesting point. So do you feel that that's something that your club members have embraced, or will that real world thing is what they're really looking for?
The virtual triathlon was actually very well received by the club members. I think we did something fun in that we did flannel pajama bottoms instead of the t-shirt that a lot of the other virtual races are doing, because everybody's giving away t-shirts, and let's do flannel PJs because everybody's at home not wearing pants anyway. So so let's do something different. And then
were they branded? Were they branded?
Yeah, they're still being printed. So this is our first ever virtual event, we were a little on the delayed side of getting the medals done and getting all the proofs submitted. So we were kind of learning as we put the event on how we need to do this a lot sooner than we should have. I totally forgot to collect shipping addresses when I had the registration for it. So I was like, I had to go back later and collect. I was like, I'm just still learning all this. So,
yeah. So do you think that that's going to be a part of what you do going forwards a bit in terms of doing a bit more of the event activity, or is it more about, you mentioned experiences, you mentioned beer quite a few times, so it seems like quite a cool thing to be a member of. So is it
I mean, happy hours have always been our staple. Like we used to have, we have monthly happy hours that are club wide, but given that we're like, again, this is going to be pre-pandemic explanations. Like we have a wide range of people or region. So like people up in Maryland or Virginia, and traffic, at least pre-pandemic, was really horrible. So people trying to get together in a central location was very tough. It could take you an hour to go like 2 or 3 miles. But now, so we decided to do like kind of regional community groups. Like we have a Montgomery County regional group, North Virginia, we have a Capitol Hill area. So those groups would have their own kind of regional happy hours monthly. And then we'd also have a club-wide happy hour. So that's things we did pre-pandemic. As far as what we're going to do going forward, I think, we're doing virtual happy hours every 2 weeks, just to try to keep people engaged. But, we have the regulars who show up every 2 weeks, and then every now and then we'll get 1 or 2 new drop-ins. And so it's great to see some new faces, but I really wish, we could have a much larger attendance to those things. But I also understand like people are just zoomed out.
Yeah, totally. In terms of the role of clubs, how do you sort of see clubs and their role within the US, I suppose, call it the triathlon industry or the wider triathlon community? Because I think it's always been an area that we've not necessarily explored in as much detail and understood that well. But it is, in many respects, it seems like the glue that hangs a lot of this together. Not everybody's in a club, but for those who enjoy that social aspect and so on, it'd be good to get your perspectives on what you think the role of clubs is.
There's I think there's going to be kind of not a dichotomy. That's not a good word for it, but kind of a split. I guess I've always seen there's two different types of clubs. Like there are the regional clubs like DC Triathlon or San Diego, which are located by a region. There are larger ones that are national based that are just like, Core Sports or Wadi Inc. or, Snapple Triathlon, or I guess former Snapple Triathlon. Those are national teams so there's not really a cohesive area for people to get together. Like you don't do, those were based on races, essentially. Like you would be able to go to one of the races somewhere in the country and maybe you see one of your national team, teammates there. Whereas I think regional clubs have the more cohesive nature because they're based around a certain region where I can go biking down the street someday and I'm not out in a group ride and somebody will say, go DC Tri, because they see me in my kit, or I see somebody with a DC Tri water bottle while they're out running. It's like, I can know that, we're going to club together. So there's more frequent chances for us to get together and have some type of cohesion. So it's going to be interesting to see now, I think, with the way things might be changing in the future, as far as triathlon goes, that there might be something stronger with the regional clubs, because I feel like the regional races I think racing is going to change in the future. I definitely think virtual racing is here to stay. But I don't feel like people are going to be, at least until we have a vaccine or we're beyond what we're going to call the pandemic timeframe. I think people aren't going to be traveling as much for races. So the national clubs, I think they'll all be here to stay, because a lot of the clubs aren't really, it doesn't really cost people a lot of money to be in a club. I think, some of the national teams are probably free to join usually. So it's not like you're losing out on anything by paying dues to something when you're not. It's not. So I don't think people are going to be traveling as far in the next year and a half for races. Like people will go to a local race. They'll go to something that's drivable and not be flying to some other race or destination for a race. So I think the regional clubs can really thrive in this type of environment, because you can have your people get together. And while I know a lot of the race directors, and I know even I saw Ironman's email, like there's going to be no post-race or post, finish line village, or the clubs are not going to be setting up tents. You're not going to be hanging out, barbecuing with your friends at the finish line. You're going to be like getting your finisher medal, putting on your mask, and we'll mail you your podium award if you got one. Like that's kind of what the change I think in the racing structure will be. So, but you can still on the race course see your friends. You can still be out there biking and running, and you can say hi, to your friends as you run by them and pass by them. So I think there still will be some team, club interaction that you're going to get in that racing environment. It's just not going to be the same kind of party atmosphere that we used to have, where you're getting together at the end and celebrating with your friends and just hanging out, drinking beers or recovery drinks or whatever.
Yeah. Hopefully, as you say, once you get this post-pandemic timeframe, that's something we can at least look forward to. But I think you make an absolutely valid point that in the meantime, it does appear that as you say, regional clubs which can do things locally that might not necessarily be attached to a local event, but you can do your social gatherings and so on, which gives you that cohesion that people I think are really looking for. And also your point about travel, I would agree that there's certainly people aren't rushing to get on planes at the moment. No, definitely. In terms of the wider endurance marketplace, obviously a lot of events have taken a big hit. Some of the races won't be coming back, very sadly. It's been a very, very tough time, obviously, for races. Do you have any thoughts on the longer term prospects for endurance sport going forwards? Is this something that you feel that clubs and events together have a really good role to play? Can we come back stronger?
I don't think races are going anywhere. People want to race. The competitive nature of people who get into triathlon or even running races or cycling races, gravel races, whatever type of event you want to have, that's not going to go away. The whole atmosphere is definitely going to change for a while. But I think once we get through it, I think it's going to come back as strong as ever. It's just whether the race organizers and those companies can weather this downturn in participation. I know a lot of the local race organizers that we have here in the Washington, D.C. area, which we're really lucky to have a really lot of great race organizers in our area putting on multiple races. I know other regions are not as lucky as we are. They've been trying everything they can to maintain or keep going through this pandemic. They've all brought on virtual racing. Some of them have switched to doing distance or physically distance, like not virtual races, but like trail racing where they can space people out. Or I know some of the local race organizers, like they have a very small cap for their in-person race, but then they've gotten permission to leave the race courses up over the course of the week. So people can come in, go do the actual course, and then submit their time. So they're working with what they've got. And, I think they'll still be here. I'm really hoping they'll still be here by the time this pandemic is over. And I hope to see that, as things start to open up, as restrictions are lifted and as guidelines are changed, that, those race organizers have a plan in place for what they expect to do. As I feel like masks are going to be a necessity of our lives for probably at least a year for now. So I hate that we have to wear a mask, but I think that's what we're going to have to end up doing.
Yeah, definitely. It does seem like the new normal, but it seems like you've got a pretty good handle on it in the space in which you operate. You're kind of comfortable with that. You're not looking at necessarily branching out into other areas. You're just going to stick at doing what you're going to do. I suppose it's just the kind of question in the back of my mind about, will clubs be sort of stepping up where events fall back, do you think? Is that like
I would say I come to this from a unique perspective in that my daily life that I do outside of triathlon is I work in biological research. And so I work in a company where we deal with the virus. We work on, therapeutics, and, I've had coworkers whose family members might have passed from the virus. So I am probably more hesitant to bring things back in person than other clubs are who are not as directly involved in dealing with the virus. So I've been very hesitant. I know people have wanted to get back out there and to do group rides, and I see them going off with like 30, 40 people with no masks and just big packs. And I'm just like, that just worries me that we're starting this. And that's like why I feel like we're already, starting wave 2, despite the fact that we never finished wave 1 of the pandemic. But so I am hoping to do more virtual events with the club to keep members engaged, to figure out ways to keep them as part of our membership and excited about being part of DC Tri Club. But as far as in person, I'm still very hesitant to do something that brings a large number of people together in a situation where there could be a spreading of the virus. So.
Yeah, no, that makes absolute sense. Very prudent, very wise. This has been absolutely fascinating. I think we could probably talk for another 20 minutes.
I'm happy to go on for another hour if you want.
It's been really cool. Thanks ever so much for your time. Really
You're quite welcome.
And the DC Tri Club go from strength to strength into next year and beyond.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks again. Take care. Cheers.
You too.
Bye.